Hello, I'm Aslina Bulmer, Director of RIBA International, and I'm here to welcome you all to today's event, Saving Global Heritage, delivered by RIBA International in partnership with the UK's Department of International Trade and the RIBA Singapore chapter as part of Singapore Archifest 2020. I'll be delighted that we have an audience from many different parts of the world. And clearly 2020, while has brought us some unprecedented challenges and hardship, it has also brought us many opportunities to connect. And today's event is a great example of this. Design excellence is a fundamental to RIBA and our architects from across the world. It underpins everything we do. Certainly, from my travels around the world, the most fascinating places are those that retain references to their past, blended with the new. Our role at RIBA International is to promote design excellence. And there are many ways in which we do this, including events like today. Our global community is very much integral to our work, and we are here to support and expand RIBA International community of members globally. We opened our first international offices in Shanghai, China, and Sharjah, UAE in December 2019. And have launched exciting program of events and activities to engage with our international members and the wider global community. So do keep an eye out of our work across the globe. I very much hope many of you would choose to join the RIBA global community, as when we are very happy to speak to you, to support you through everything you do, particularly during this unprecedented time. Over to today's event. The theme of Archifest 2020 is Saving Our World. Very apt indeed, it feels at times like this. It also reflects the new environment we find ourselves in. Today, we will discuss how architects and architecture play a key role in safeguarding our heritage in the built environment and act as guardians of culture and history that is embodied in our cities. I'm sure you will agree with me that we have an excellent lineup of speakers from across the globe today, from 5 different countries in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, and I'm delighted to be introducing them shortly. May I first take this opportunity to thank all of them: Jonathan Poe, Jeff Rich, Un Wei Kei, Jigan, Ku Peng Beng, Mark Kiffin Powell, Dong Hao, Mustafa Kamal Zulkarnain, Colin Ward, and Annalie Riches. Thank you to all our speakers for taking the time out of your very busy schedule for this event. It is very much appreciated. We're also very grateful to the RIBA Singapore chapter for their support with today's events and for their ongoing work to promote good design and architecture in Singapore. With our new chair, Ee Tiong Lim, the chapter is working on an exciting program of events and initiatives for 2021. And last month launched a new Instagram at RIBA Singapore chapter. So please do follow them to keep up with all the wonderful things that they are planning and doing. Today's event is also part of a program to discuss modern conservation in Singapore, particularly in the context of rapidly developing Southeast Asian city. Last year, RIBA sponsored 2 UK speakers at Progressive Once More, the Modern ASEAN Architecture Conference with Docomomo International and the Singapore Urban Regeneration Authority to debate innovative adaptive reuse of modernist buildings and sites. Next year, RIBA International and RIBA Singapore chapter hope to run a pan-professional one-day design charrette to produce innovative design ideas for the reuse of Singapore's modern architectural heritage in August 2021, pandemic permitting, of course. At this point, I also would like to thank the UK DIT in Singapore, who has been brilliant and supporting us through this event and other things as well. The work of the DIT in export, investment, and cultural relations is crucial to promoting the work of RIBA and our architects globally, and helping the UK architects to win work internationally too. And we very much value their support. So thank you to the team. On that note, I have the pleasure to welcome the first speaker for today, the British High Commissioner to the Republic of Singapore, Ms. Cara Owen, CVO, who has kindly taken time out of her no doubt very busy schedule to be here today to give us the welcome address. So I'm going to hand over now to you, High Commissioner.
Well, Aselina, thank you so much. And thank you very much for having me. I should be thanking you, because I think Archifest and the kind of conversations that we're going to be having today are some of the most interesting, I think, that we're having today. I want to say good evening because it's already nighttime here in Singapore, but looking at who has joined and where you've joined from, I think I should also be saying good afternoon and good morning, because this is truly an event that has brought together people from across the world. And I'm really pleased to be speaking at the top of this event, hosted by the Royal Institute for British Architects as part of Archifest 2020. The British High Commission in Singapore and the DIT team within it are really proud to continue to support Archifest. Architecture itself, as you can probably tell, gets me really excited. It's the blend of pure creativity with hard engineering that I find really, really inspiring. Architecture defines our societies. I know myself, if I'm living in somewhere that is surrounded by beautiful and functional architecture, my mood can be entirely different than if I'm mostly existing in a place where the architecture is less functional or less beautiful. Architecture solves problems. It defines our mood, our health, and our well-being. I'm really proud too of the role that UK design firms have in architecture all over the world, including here in Singapore, where architects have the pleasure of interacting with some really far-sighted Government of Singapore partners, such as the Urban Redevelopment Authority. I love how important architecture and architects are in the UK as well, and how important the UK is in the world of architecture. The UK is a global architecture hub, and our architects who are working there, not all of whom are British, but many of whom are, have star power. They are working on iconic projects in high-profile places, including state-of-the-art airports, retail experiences, and rejuvenated areas. I think the theme for this year's Archifest, Architecture Saving the World, I love the ambition within that statement, references a national preoccupation that we and our Singapore friends here share, and that is around climate. As the UK takes up our presidency of COP26, we feel really responsible for mobilising global coordinated action to do what we can to tackle the challenge of climate change. The UK, as you probably know, became the first major economy to pass a net zero emissions law. That's a legally binding commitment to become carbon neutral by 2050. It's going to be challenging for us to do that, and we need to make sure that all sectors of our economy and our society are playing their part. And architecture has a really key role in whether or not we're going to achieve this. According to the UK Green Construction Board, the built environment sector is responsible for up to 42% of total greenhouse gas emissions in the UK. So to reach our climate change targets, it's essential that the built environment sector come up with innovative solutions to reduce its carbon impact. With the UK exporting more design than any other country, we recognise our responsibility to play a leading role in driving sustainability across the global sector. A key area where architects can play an important role is in the conservation, modernisation and adaptation of existing buildings. Change today is a really bewildering place, and it might be really easy to knock down an old building and replace it with shiny new structures. I think in all of our cities, we've got examples of where that has been the default option. But I wanted to share three really startling facts from a Historic England report. This report says that compared to refurbishing a traditional Victorian terraced house, a new building of the same size produces up to 13 times more embodied carbon. This equates to around 16.4 tonnes of CO2, which is the equivalent of the emissions released by driving 60,000 kilometres in a large petrol car. Demolishing buildings not only produces millions of tonnes of waste, but also building new has high energy costs. It guzzles resources and accounts for 26% of the world's plastic consumption. However, if we responsibly refurbished 50% of all pre-1919 residential buildings between 2021 and 2031, carbon emissions would be reduced by 39.6 million tonnes by 2050. That's equivalent to more than 3 million flights between London and Dublin. Historic buildings play an essential role in the everyday lives of all of our people. It plays a role in our cultural identity and in the economy. They can inspire creativity and enterprise. They can bring communities together or not. They can make people happier about where they live or not. Having known Singapore for many years myself, one of the biggest changes I've seen, which has been a really inspiring and pleasant change in the last 10 years, is the stress on heritage, history and meaning driven by the URA, the NHB and the BCA. Projects in the UK, such as London Bridge Station redevelopment and Battersea Power Station, have proved that with creativity and innovation and tenacity, historic projects can give a new lease of life. They can generate jobs and regenerate local communities and can act as a catalyst for the development of a whole surrounding area whilst also being sustainable. Architects have the power to transform a building from a liability into an asset for the future. So it's really encouraging to see RIBA develop a 2030 climate challenge to help architects meet net zero or better whole life carbon for new and retrofitted buildings in 2030. I'd like to thank RIBA for bringing together a wide range of experts from the UK, Singapore, China, the Gulf and ASEAN countries to share their experience of breathing new life into neglected heritage buildings across the world and the impact that that has on local communities. I'm really hoping that your experience of dialing in to this webinar is going to inspire you to consider becoming a member of RIBA if you're not already. It was founded in 1834, but it's a global professional membership body driving excellence in architecture. They aim to develop collaborative projects and support global networking, promote design excellence in architecture and create greater mobility within the profession. I'm really delighted that RIBA continues to validate 2 courses here in Singapore at the National University of Singapore, a partnership that dates way back to 1968 to create qualified architects who are also RIBA certified. And this helps create a truly global talent pool here in Singapore. The partnership is really mutually beneficial. The Singapore chapter has over 250 members, forming part of the larger network of Asia and Australasia. And the focus of the chapter is activities for local members promoting lively and creative debate. So I am just the opening act. The really exciting bit is yet to come. I have already seen some of the absolutely delicious images that you're going to be treated to as the real experts can introduce to you some of the ways in which heritage buildings have been given a new lease of life. Back to you, Aslina. Thank you again so much for having me, and I wish you a really productive webinar.
Thank you, High Commissioner, for your words and for joining us today. Climate change is most certainly the biggest challenge we are all facing, and I know the global architecture profession is, understand this very much and is very much key to the elements of their work and design in finding solution and that can influence long-lasting change. Thank you again, High Commissioner. Well, I'm now delighted to open the sharing session. Each speaker of our 10 speakers has just 6 minutes, they have been warned, to share their thoughts, followed by Q&A. So please start thinking about your questions in advance, audience, and send them in the chat box or the Q&A function at the bottom. Without further ado, please welcome our first speaker from Singapore, Jonathan Poh, Principal Architect, Provoke Architecture and Docomomo Singapore. Jonathan is well known for leading an initiative to save Dakota's Crescent Post SIT estates following announcement to develop the area in 2014, in which he and his group convinced the Member of Parliament to file a motion to conserve the area. Well done, Jonathan. Yet continue to be active with Docomomo to persuade others to conserve other notable buildings in Singapore, including the Golden Mile Complex and Pearl Bank Apartments. Over to you, Jonathan, for your 6 minutes.
Thanks, Aslina, for the introduction. Hi, I'm Jonathan. Today, my presentation would be about our efforts in promoting rejuvenation of modern landmarks in Singapore. Just to give a brief intro of who we are, Docomomo is actually a non-profit advocacy group and we just submitted our candidacy for the Singapore Charter quite recently, and we are hoping to have it approved this month. We are no stranger to RIBA. We collaborated with the RIBA last year during the Archifest, holding fringe events ahead of our Marciana International Conference last year. So we held this exhibition focusing on successful UK examples of adaptive reuse, as well as a design charrette workshop where we invited local practitioners to share their experience in adaptive reuse together with the help of RIBA. So that all culminated into the main event, which is the 8th Marciana International Conference, which is a conference for the region, focusing on techniques and experiences of conserving modern architecture in ASEAN. So we actually invited overseas speakers, Historic England, Urban Splash, and we also held tours around to look at some of these endangered buildings. Now, what we want to talk about today is the heritage values of our modern landmarks, right? Why are we so interested in them? Because they have an inherent value, because of its significance in our early urban renewal days, right? So that's why we're looking at that. Right. And the issues that surround them, basically, we don't have a comprehensive grading system. We have this, which is why it's also underappreciated, right? And there's also very poor management of the buildings estate, and also land use laws that do not that sort of encourage speculative collective sales of these buildings. So these actually sort of led to the decimation of many modern landmarks in Singapore. And as you can see on the image on the right, most of them have been either demolished or some of them have been threatened, right? So one of our first projects that we looked into was Pearl Bank Apartments. Pearl Bank Apartments, for some of you may know, is actually a groundbreaking prototype, right? Where you have split level maisonette units, right? And it also has a very groundbreaking broken cylinder kind of form that captures breeze and maximizes views to the outdoors. We actually sold to a developer in Singapore called Capital Land, right? And what we did was that in the background, we tried to persuade the stakeholders, Capital Land, together with some of the authorities, to try to persuade Capital Land to see what else can they do to the building in order to keep the building and not tear it down, right? So we looked at alternative schemes of assisted living because of its proximity to the hospital, to a hospital, all right, and trying to persuade them and see, hey, why not change part of retain some of the building for this purpose, right? And we also looked into, and we worked with an engineer in Arab, right, to see how can we sort of decant some of the building area to become useful GFA, and how do we to take out some of the building in order to input new units that could cater to the new market, right? So these were some of the efforts that we went through, but finally our efforts fell through because there were a lot of stumbling blocks, and there are primarily four issues. One is the lack of political will, lack of finances, lack of technical knowledge, and the lack of time. So these were somehow the take-home lessons that we got that sort of informed us what we should do for future advocacy work in this kind of nature. We also looked at successful examples overseas. One in this case is of course in the UK. We looked at Centre Point, Brunswick, Park Hill, and Murray and of course these two will be talked about later by two of our speakers today. So we tried to talk to the authorities and say and tell them, hey, look, it's been done overseas. Why can't we do it here? And we sort of bring out some of the essence of this building in order to make them see that it could be workable. However, unfortunately, there's some forces within the policies and all that were just stopping us. So to conclude, I think moving us forward, we need to address policy issues. There are many things involved, like listing and documentation of these modern heritage buildings, coming out with frameworks for developers to adopt, right? So these are things that we need to look at. And finally, of course, we want to establish that rehabilitation equals environmental progress, like what Kara has said just now. So we are definitely aligned with the international community that conservation is in fact a way of environmental conservation as well. So thank you, and thank you for this time. Yeah.
Thank you, Jonathan. Fantastic. You stuck to your 6 minutes as well. Much appreciated. It was really fascinating start to this talk. Our next speaker is from the UK, Jeff Rich. Jeff is an architect and managing partner at Fielden, Clegg and Bradley Studios based in Bath and London. Jeff is the former SPAB Leatherby Scholar and is an accredited conservation architect with both the AABC and the RIBA schemes. His current projects include the repair and regeneration of oldest surviving iron frame buildings in the world at Shrewsbury Flax Mill, Maltings for Historic England, and the HLF-funded repair and renovation of Bath Abbey. As usual, Jeff, pleasure to hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Aslina, and hi everyone. I'm a conservation architect based in World Heritage City of Bath in the UK, and in my talk I'd like to share a project about a historic building in Yangon in Myanmar, which aimed to save a building and maximize training opportunities. Our case study is the Tourist Burma building seen here. It's one of the most important landmark buildings in Yangon's downtown. It was built in 1905, and it was built as Burma's first department store. And later it was the Ministry of Hotels and Tourism, so hence the Tourist Burma name. I believe heritage like this should be saved because it tells the story of a place and its people. It gives a place cultural richness, and it creates new opportunities. The Tourist Burma building has been located in the center of Yangon and has a very prominent location next to the historic pagoda and overlooks the city hall. But despite this, it had become empty and unused for many years and had become a prominent symbol of decline. In this prominent place, we wanted to deliver high impact outcomes for the city and its different communities. All regeneration projects present great opportunities for collaboration. And in this project, we wanted to seek every opportunity for engagement. This included designing work alongside architects and craftspeople and creating skills training opportunities. From the start, we hosted workshops to develop the design approach and to bring together people from different backgrounds. 100 years ago, it was part of a green city with shady pavements and a walkable street life. And we wanted to get these qualities back by opening up to the street, by creating low energy office space, and by maximizing the potential of the roof terrace. We also wanted to share a vision for the future to persuade stakeholders to support the project. This key image aimed to show how we wanted to bring the building back to life with active uses spilling out onto the street. And we wanted to show how the building could attract people all year round and throughout the day, both locals and tourists. Internally, we felt that restoring key spaces sympathetically could add real value. This included the best of the historic interiors and using them to inspire new design interventions, but also that traditional environmental controls like opening windows and ceiling fans could play an important part in creating comfortable space. And of course, we wanted to make the most of the roof terrace to enable the public to enjoy the views over special spaces, and of course, to create a selfie space to encourage people to come and engage a memory in a newly created city space. Now, as part of the site works, vocational training was something that was very important, and it ensured that the restoration was undertaken to the very highest standard. It also ensured that the construction industry gained important new skills needed to repair many of the other important historic buildings across the city. So the project developed skills, and it also revealed skills that already existed. And after repairing the main elevation, the training extended to traditional decorative elements. And here we can see lime wash, traditional paint being mixed and applied on site as a finishing coat. Inside the building, the repairs of all surfaces provided important opportunities for learning and training. Here, the colourful traditional floor tiles, which were originally manufactured in the UK 100 years ago, are being repaired by craftsmen and also offering a look and learn experience for specifiers. And here's some before and afters. So outside, the street frontage originally was closed and empty, inaccessible, neglected and overgrown, and now it's accessible, open and welcoming. Looking more closely at the front facade, in its original state, we found it to be crumbling. Its decay was accelerated by the wrong hard materials, cement mortars and embedded ironwork, and we replaced those with soft lime mortars and that traditional paint to help it look great and to breathe easily in future. On the roof, we found the terrace completely inaccessible, empty, forgotten and unused. But now it's ready for a new life with space for gathering and eating and for people to enjoy, take in the views and consider the history of the spaces around them. The main floors had been left unused. The key surfaces like teak flooring had been stolen and vandalized, and now they've been restored with traditional lighting and ceiling fans installed, and all of the windows in the building fully repaired and restored to be open and functional. And at ground floor, spaces which had been neglected and structurally propped have been carefully repaired. And here you can see some of those decorative floor tiles from earlier and some of the historic painted advertisements which were revealed and restored as part of the process. And those shop windows which now open up onto the street. The project was opened in September 2019, and one of the key outcomes is that it now provides great space for new economic and social activity in the building. It literally has come back to life with new uses for all kinds of people in the community. The second key outcome has been its demonstration of sustainable development. This image shows how we've responded to some of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which has been an important way to start a new conversation for Yangon and to measure that in an international context. And many historic regeneration projects have this opportunity. But most importantly, the project has changed people's lives. It trained over 500 people from professional design services to craft skills, including international and local expertise. And here are some of the project team on the scaffold at the end of the job. But most importantly, I think the project demonstrates how saving global heritage can create important possibilities for professionals, building owners, politicians, and the community. And I think it's a great example of how heritage buildings can be repurposed for exciting, valuable, and sustainable reuses. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for sharing the work in Yangon, which is very, very interesting indeed. We're now moving swiftly to our next speaker, back to Singapore, Ms. Un YK. Ms. Un YK is the Associate Principal at Architects 61 in Singapore. She has been involved in many high-profile developments in Singapore, including Fullerton Hotel, which many of us, I'm sure, recognize, One Fullerton, and which received URA Architectural Heritage Award in 2001, and also the Capital Development, which received another Heritage Award in 2016. YK, the audience is all yours.
Thanks, Rosalina, for the introduction. Okay. Oh, let me get the clicker. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm excited to share about sustaining use in capital Singapore. This is a winning competition. led by RMP in collaboration with Architect 61 in 2011. Capital is a mixed-use development that integrates the new and old in Singapore's civic district. The heritage buildings complement the new, comprising of retail and residential units. In the center, there is a public plaza which allows for high visibility of the Capitol Theatre and direct ground floor access for red carpet events. I will share on the historical use of three buildings: Capitol Theatre, Capitol Building, and Stamford House, the restoration process, and how challenges faced were overcome to retain the original use in these buildings. Capitol Theatre was purpose-built in the 1930s for live performance theatre and cinema function. It was a building with ceiling fans and ventilation openings around the dome and sides. From the 50s, Art Deco features were added. However, renovations in the 80s covered these features. The last movie was screened in 1998, and the theatre was not in use for more than 10 years. We at Architect 61 were mindful of the rich heritage of these buildings. Many have fond memories of these places. Having done similar restoration work to landmark buildings, we were aware of the need for sensitive restoration. We found the walls to be in poor condition. 3D laser scannings and reverse molds were used to carefully retain and repair these Art Deco features in situ or prefabricated. Over the years, thick painting blurred the fine details of the Pegasus, so the many coats of paint were carefully scraped off, damages repaired, and the Pegasus was given a fresh coat of paint. I was pleasantly surprised when we found some old ceiling marks on site. With this discovery, we reinstated the historical appearance using new acoustic ceiling panels, complete with gold gildings, to meet the cinema performance requirements. The old fly tower was demolished and replaced with a new. In doing so, we had to make sure that the proscenium was well protected, especially from Singapore's wet weather. One of the challenges here was to excavate a pit while keeping the structures intact for the rotational floor system. This allows the stall seats to be turned over and tucked under the floor for flexible seating configuration, including flat floor mode for wedding dinners. So Capitol has retained its original use, complete with the restored Zodak painting and the original ceiling fans still in place. One cannot miss the revived Capitol Theatre neon sign facing the public plaza. This plaza has a radiating floor pattern, which blends the new and the old in the entire development and creates vibrancy at pedestrian level for public activities. Here, with the new Galleria skylight, the once mundane back lane is now transformed into a lively place for alfresco dining. Capitol Building is once again a place for shopping and dining. From a distance, the changes in the before and after photos are not apparent, but there were significant efforts to restore these buildings. Second layer acoustic windows were added to the levels 2 and 3, while retaining the first layer conservation windows. This was done to meet the needs of the hotel guest rooms facing the road. Capitol Building has retained its original use at level 1, with all the shop fronts restored. The original structures were strengthened and the existing timber floor joists were retained. We conducted tactile survey and petrography tests, which showed that the brick walls were damp and soft upon the removal of the cement skim coat layer. These gave us a good understanding of the facade condition. I enjoyed sidewalks as we cited the various stages of painstaking restoration work in action, like the repair of the plasterwork and the restoration of the highly ornamented facade. Due to ownership changes, the original interior layout changed several times. Interventions and modifications were introduced, such as the removal of the escalators and some columns. We added the atrium smoke barrier and a new swimming pool at level 4. So Sanford House is once again a hotel. It is possible to retain original uses in buildings and sites. To do so, certain challenges will have to be overcome and solutions informed so that heritage is sustained into the future. With this, I end my sharing session. Thank you.
Thank you, YK. It's really fascinating insight into the capital development. I must go and visit when I'm next in Singapore. We are now moving further north. Our next speaker is Jigan. Jigan is an associate and deputy chief architect at RIBA, based in China. He has extensive experience working internationally, both in Asia and also in Europe, on a variety of building typologies through different stages of design. Please welcome Jigan.
Hi everyone, this is Ji from Europe, China. Today I'd love to share some experience about the heritage building by one of our most recent renovation project in Shanghai. So about 100 years ago, there were several concessions in Shanghai. International architects designed many buildings here. And those buildings are not pure Western classic style, but also combined some of the local lifestyle, such as a Lian house, becoming a unique Shanghai architecture style and lifestyles. From the side photo, you can see an old lady still
Hello, G. This is Stu here. Can you hear me okay? Okay. It looks as though G has had a bit of an issue there. Aslina, are you on the line?
I am on the line. We're going to move to Peng Peng and we'll come back to G when we get him back online, if that's okay.
Okay, absolutely no problem at all.
Okay. Peng Peng, I'm going to hand this over to you. Peng Peng is back to Singapore. He's the founder of Arc Studio in Singapore, 20 years plus experience of practicing architect, and together with NUS, Peng Peng was the lead curator of Singapore's contribution to the 2010 Biennale 1000 Singapore's a model of the compact city. Peng Peng, I'm going to hand this session now over to you.
Hello everyone, I'll be sharing about the Barracks Hotel. When we got this project through a competition, it was a military barracks that was built around the early 1900s. And we were just thinking about, how do we connect with the past of this place, not just the barracks, but the entire island. And we wanted to the project to be a dialogue, not just about a moment in time, but about a continuation as a dynamic unfolding of culture. But a military place and what it wishes to be a resort hotel appeared to us to be two programs that were worlds apart. How do we bridge this gap? And I think one of the questions we asked was, how could this place of hostility be transformed to a place of hospitality? How do we create a space where strangers become friends, where enemies can cross over and become a family? And we saw this picture of the soldiers and along the corridors of the barracks. These 4 soldiers took a picture while they were resting. And this was a quotation that we saw: Sunday afternoon swimming in the sea. Thank goodness for the strong timber paga. I wouldn't want to meet a shark. This captured an interesting moment for us because it was joy, and yet there was, fear, but also a kind of levity, a kind of lightheartedness about the condition that they found themselves in. And it was a pretty serious job that they were undertaking, and we were wondering, what were these soldiers defending? And how could we honor that kind of action, that they were traveled far away from home and defending a place. And so to us, this became the bridge, and we felt that our architecture could similarly capture the kind of contrast between the joy and the fear and the kind of hardness of the land and the softness of the sea. So we went on to be inspired to create a setting for the resort that had two qualities. The conserved site was earthy. It felt to us like a forest, like something hard and heavy and disciplined. Whereas the new additions, we saw them as the sea. The planning was archipelago organization, vast and blue and ethereal and light. And even the geometry, we took on the classical geometry for the conserved building, but introduced a more fluid counterpoint. So for the new, that was curvilinear and soft, and it recalls the reef and the kelp flowing in the sea. The island, the site is really a very strategic site. It's the southern tip of Singapore. The picture that you see here is a very busy shipping passage. And around the late 1800s, the British military felt that it was necessary to build forts on this island to protect this passageway from pirates. And the island at that time was called the Pulau Belakang Mati, which literally translated means belakang is like behind, mati is like death, like behind death, the island behind death. But in the 70s, when the British handed over this island to Singapore, they found a new name, Sentosa Island, which was about peace. And it occurred to us that the soldiers, the project that was started by the British to defend peace, really was a movement from hostility, from fighting, a preparation to fight, to a different kind of preparation, a preparation to be host, a preparation for peace. And a resort to us would be an embodiment of that kind, a place for love and rest. So more than the structure, we found that the architecture was about the idea and the concept. And it was a project that was spanning for us 100 years, from the 1904s to today. And how could we become a part of that fulfillment of that dream or that project for peace? And so this is the site that when we found the project, it was a, if you look at this site, the rooftops in orange are all the conserved building. On the north is the Resorts World, which is a big integrated casino. And this is the site. And we were asked to really conserve all the buildings in front on the ridge. And the way we had done that was to build over the depression, but also kept the strategic, the parade square conserved, but in a new way. We thought about the hardness of the parade square becoming a soft lawn that could be a setting for a new kind of parade, a new kind of march. which was our wedding march. And this place used to be the mess hall for the officers. It's become a new dining destination where cuisines from all over the world could be experienced. And the trees on the site were also part of our setting, and we conserve all the big trees on site and use the trees strategically to create an environment that was very close to nature. And over here at the deepest part of our resort, we created a wall compound just to shield us away from some mechanical plants of a neighboring complex, but also to create like a secret garden, a garden felt like a fortified garden, but a sanctuary for the resort. So the spaces within the resort that used to be where the soldiers slept were combined and turned into suites, 40 suites in total. And this contrast between the old and new could be seen at this point over here. And we use the landscape to mediate between the new and the old. And our new additions were carefully introduced in deep colored metal, and they house the mechanical and electrical fittings that were carefully hidden. So a lot of the work was about hiding, concealing, and being quite sensitive to the existing. Thank you very much. So this concludes my presentation of the movement of architecture over 100 years, from hostility, the military, to a place of rest and love, hospitality, resort. Thank you.
Thank you, Peng Bang. I much prefer Sentosa than and the behind, the dead behind. I'm a Malay, so I know exactly what you mean. That's a much better name for an island. I'm going to try to take us back to G. So I'm going to hand you over to G. G, if you're there, please rejoin us.
Hello, can you see me now?
We can see you, G, but we can, if you could, your volume, if you could increase your volume, that would be great.
Okay, how about now?
There we go, perfect.
Okay. Hi, this is G from China. Today, I'd love to share some experience about the heritage buildings by one of our most recent renovation projects in Shanghai. And about 100 years ago, there were several concession zones in Shanghai, and international architects designed lots of many buildings here. And those buildings appeared not pure Western classic style, but also combined and considered some of the local lifestyles, such as the Lane House. The Lane House in Shanghai becoming a very unique architectural style, and a lot of people living in the Lane House. From the site photo, you can see an old lady still living in this office building, and she got her roof gardens on the top. And our task is renovated 8 buildings along a 200-meter historical street. In the very beginning, those buildings are pharmacy, theater, taxi company, but nowadays the buildings are used as a hardware market and mixed with residents. And through 100 years time, some of the building lost their original architectural aesthetic and values, becoming fake historical buildings. So how can we choose a right method to restore the valuable history? Build as original, or build as old, or build as new? For example, this building, the facade elements and the decorations are lost in the history, but the overall building and the facade geometry still kept the original rhythm. So we did a very deep dig the history from the archive, the historical photos, and also we analyzed the geometry and the aesthetics of the building from the same era. we reorganized the geometry of the facade on the historical photo and restored the Art Deco style elements. So the buildings, we call it built as original. We think that's a respect to the original history. And talking about built as old. So those, I can't see the page change. Okay. So this building is 100 years ago. It's the facade are covered by the billboards and many additional equipment such as air conditioning and exposed outside. So we try not to impact the old lady's lifestyle, and we analyze the hidden geometry of the language and compare with the current facade. We did the research and finally provide a traditional style with a new facade, which the new elements could either indicate the air conditioning. We call it respect the valuable history. Next slide. Okay. So in this page, we can see those buildings on the corner. In 100 years ago, that's a quite modern design. So, but in 1990s, it becoming a very awkward, fake European style and used as like a hardware market. It's original, a very famous theater. So we plan to restore the function used as a theater. Okay.
Okay, yeah, it seems like G is having another problem with the internet there. G, let me just check one more time. Can you hear me okay? Oh dear. Okay, Azlina, over to you.
Yes, okay, we'll come back to G at the end to give him time to see whether we can get him back. For now, I'm going to hand over to our next speaker. Sorry for this, but I think it's part of the world we live in today. We are at the back end of technology. Forgive us for that. But we do have our next speaker, which is Mark Powell-Kiffin. Mark is the head of architecture at Abu Dhabi Department of Culture and Tourism. And he's been in UAE for the past 12 years and has gained extensive experience and knowledge of both Emirati vernacular architecture and modern heritage of Abu Dhabi. His works mainly focus on restoration, remodeling, and refurbishment of some key sites in Abu Dhabi, including Qas Al Hassan. Mark will correct me if I pronounce that incorrectly. I had a privilege to visit that with Mark earlier this year, just before lockdown. And over to you, Mark. It was a very impressive building.
Thank you, Azlina. If you don't mind, I'll just turn the video off in case I have any issues with the broadband, the same as G. And also, I've got a face for radio, so it's probably best that you don't see me as well. I would like to thank Singapore Archifest and the RIBA for inviting me here today to talk about a project which is held very close to my heart, which is Qas Al Hassan. It's Abu Dhabi's most significant heritage building, which we completed the conservation of in December 2018. As a starting point, when we think of global heritage, we obviously can't solely think of architecture. We must also consider the historic environment and the contemporaneous quotidian life that informed the creation of these wonderful structures, which we cherish so much today. At this point, I think we should also be mindful of the categorization of heritage by UNESCO, those being tangible heritage and intangible heritage. This case study is a key example of an immovable, tangible heritage, an architecture which has been strongly informed by the rich intangible heritage of Abu Dhabi, the human treasures that we carry within ourselves. Abu Dhabi is a physical time, sorry, Qasr Al Hosn is a physical timeline of the story of Abu Dhabi. It's a building that started in circa 1760 as a watchtower, which marked a potable water supply, which became an impenetrable fortress in the mid-1800s and evolved into the ruler's palace in the mid-1900s, and remains to be this Emirate's cultural heart to this day as a museum of this people and the place. The project commenced with a detailed conservation management plan, which, through the engagement with the local community, National Archives, and by undertaking physical investigations into the building fabric, it enabled us to understand the significance of the structure, the sequence, and the substance of the enclosures and events that subsequently informed the conservation process. Undertaking the conservation management plan was a time-consuming labour of love, but it also made it abundantly apparent how much the local community held this building in their hearts. Qasr Al Hosn was and remains to be the epicentre of their daily lives, a building that is treasured like a communal heirloom that generated stories which have become lasting memories transmitted by word of mouth from generation to generation, thereby creating a symbiotic relationship between architecture and humanity, the tangible and the intangible, the physical and the metaphysical. Storytelling is something that a qualitative historical restoration process should enable a building to do in its own right. In this regard, we believe that Qasr Al Hosn is an exemplar. The concept design was to express the fabric and the authenticity of each of the building's eras of evolution and phases of construction. This would then enable the building to narrate to the visitor the political, social, and economical developments of Abu Dhabi through the fabric of the building, which witnessed a small sea-edge settlement morph into a modern metropolis. The architecture of Qasr Al Hosn is of a vernacular origin, utilizing coral stone from a nearby reef for its masonry walls, mangrove poles from passing traders as beams for the floors, and the fabrication of lime mortar and render from the surrounding flats of gypsum, white sand, and crushed seashells. This render then gave rise to the building obtaining the colloquial name of the White Fort by the passing mariners who would sail by the Arabian Peninsula. In the 1980s, the building was poetically transformed into an Abu Dhabi archive. The building, being a place of community memories, would now be a receptacle for the memories of a new nation, a nation that would be governed by those who sat in a modernized council chamber located immediately outside the building's walls. At this time, the historic fabric was informed by the introduction of modern materials such as concrete, engineered timber, and contemporary building services, which were introduced into the fabric, trading traditional passive cooling techniques for more immediate modern mechanical means. In order to conserve, restore, and reinstate the memory of the building, a team of experts from around the globe were gathered to undertake best practice methods of conservation. Artisans and craftsmen had to be carefully sourced and in some instances trained from scratch to enable the specialized traditional works such as date palm weaving, coral stone laying, and timber carvings to be undertaken in an authentic and sympathetic manner. This process not only preserved the building, but the intangible heritage of traditional craftsmanship. The architectural composition of Qasr Al Hosn can be viewed as a series of layers and enclosures, which are intelligently composed to respond to the arid coastal desert conditions by providing passive cooling through courtyards, cloisters, and chamber walls to enable these interiors to become habitable spaces. The porous coral walls absorb the heat of the day like a calcified sponge and then dissipate the warmth in the evenings to mitigate the cold. The width of the rooms is predicated by the 3.6 meter maximum length that a mangrove pole will grow to. These dense timber beams are used to create narrow, lofty volumes, which via thin slot openings in the external walls called bagiles. These devices channel a cool coastal breeze through a lofty volume to provide cross ventilation and enable the occupants to retain their privacy and shut the sunlight out by being able to keep the larger windows below closed. The conservation policies and architectural concepts strove to present and preserve as much historic fabric of the eras of origin as possible. If fabric from the 1980s was adversely affecting the original fabric from a previous era, then it would be sensitively removed. If fabric of origin was in danger of becoming lost, then every measure possible was undertaken to retain it, even to the point of intravenously feeding resin back into historic timbers to reinstate their strength. The render treatment of the building walls have been conserved to their era of origin, but in doing so, they aid the visitor in their interpretation of the eras of construction. The changes in material, texture, and color are all related to a phase of the building's architectural evolution. The dark brown render that we see here on the historic watchtower enables the oldest element of the composition to act as the anchor of the site. The founding structure of Abu Dhabi, which was first noticed in 1760, provides a sense of place and a significance that there are not many places on earth where you can physically engage with a structure that started a place that united a nation. The tactile render of the outer palace walls transmits the honesty of the 1939 to 1945 coral and sea stone construction that lies beneath it. Walls that were built by a local community in times of hardship arising from the boats that would have provided passing trail connections with India being otherwise engaged in global conflict. The smooth white rendered walls are those of a more modern era. They represent the original fort which occupied the space in the 1800s. Through the use of modern materials and the sharp cornered smooth white surfaces, the building is readily identifiable as a later addition to the ensemble, and the glass links act as a memory of lost structures from the original and now serve as transitions between the gallery spaces. The extensive amount of analysis was undertaken into high resolution historic images to help us with the reinstatement of details in plaster, render bandings, step facades, to undertake them as per their origins. Even studies into the depths and directional alignment of shadows were undertaken to identify the locations of lost structures and the thickness of render bandings that were in need of renovation on the facades. Numerous archaeological findings were discovered during the works. Extensive investigations were undertaken prior to the commencement of works in areas where remains of lost structures were suspected to be. The remains of significant buildings have been showcased and interpreted for visitor engagement and understanding without fabrication of heritage. The works to Casserole Hossan not only conserved the building, but its context as well. The landscape works served to reinstate the coastal desert setting in which the building originally thereby was conceived, enabling the visitor to understand the vernacular and almost monolithic connection between the building, the people, and the place, which takes us full circle in this talk as Casserole Hossan still stands to this day as the cultural heart of Abu Dhabi. As one would expect from a fortified structure, the building is strong and functional, but to fulfill the full Vitruvian definition of architecture, there is a beautiful manner in which these pragmatic and structural attributes are carried out. The architecture not only has utilitas, firmitas, and venustas, but has touched the hearts of many through memory, meaning, and its timelessness. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That was very good. Thank you. It is a beautiful building. I very much enjoyed the tour that you gave earlier this year. And I really love those old photos as well. We're going to go across the other side of the world again to China, but this time to Dong Hao. We will try and connect to G at the end. Dong Hao, I hope you can hear me. Dong Hao is the co-founder and partner at Cross Boundaries. Aside from practice, he has written for FT China's education column. He's also teaching at Tsinghua University, Peking University, and the Central Academy of Fine Arts. Dong Hao, I'm handing over to you now.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to participate. Okay, I'm from Cross Boundaries. We are an international team formed by German partner and the Chinese. We have been practicing in China for more than 10 years. As we all know, China, with the dynamic wave of construction, there's no way to avoid building new buildings. Let me see the slides. Next, please. Okay. So I think for us, or today, the challenge I'm raising is how we save the heritage when we build anew. So from the picture, we can see it's oops, go backward one more. From the picture.
Hi, Dong. There seems to be a 3-second delay, so if you just want to bear that in mind. Sorry to interrupt. We'll add another 10 seconds onto your time.
Okay, sure. So now, okay, now we're back to the first picture with the bird view. Are we on the same page? I hope so. From this picture, we can see it's a typical countryside in south of China with a morning fog. And you can see the most buildings here are 1 or 2 floors of bungalow buildings, either private house or workshops. So when we were called to build a kindergarten here, this is a 5th tier city or town in China. So instead of, as everyone did in the neighbor village, building a 3-floor concrete blocks with a crispy color outside, we were thinking how we turn this kindergarten, return that and respect the neighborhood. So that's how we turn in, we call that a village in the village. So instead of building a centralized concrete block, we constructed a cluster with all the classrooms independently, forming a group. So here you can see on the picture, also each building, we applied the local architecture style with a pitched roof, slope. And on the next picture, you will see also the local break wall technique being applied. And here is a night view. On this picture, current, if you are, I think we are all together, you can see this cluster of building first form each classroom independent building, but same time between the buildings, we constructed corners and all the enclosure for children to play and learn and mingle. As most of Chinese rural countryside experiencing today, the most young adults and young parents are all left to the big city for better life. So in all those villages, the typical situation is elderly and grandchildren are left. So how we give return the life back to the village. So this is also when we were commissioned to construct this kindergarten. We were thinking, actually, with the openness of the kindergarten, this can turn to as a community center at night, while during the daytime, the building functioned as a kindergarten. Oops. Next, it's not moving. Can you still hear me? Oh, okay. So now you can see on this picture, the village is very much surrounded with a rural and farmland around, all around. And the most brick are recycled brick from the neighbor and the own villages. On the second floor, we provide a big deck. So from here, you can see both for the ground floor and the second floor, we provide a spontaneous play possibility for those kids, which is very important for the children in this age. Next.
It is changing. It's just taking a second to catch up with you.
Okay, sure. I just need to be patient. Still not on my screen. Okay, here. Okay, this is the last picture of this project. On this picture, you can see the typical situation or the population situation here. So you only see the grandparents and the grandchild. So this is one of the answer for us when we build new, how we save the heritage in the surrounding, how we respect the surrounding. Next. Okay, this is the new. While we are doing new, how we can save the energy and save the environment, that's also something we consider. And this is the light structure we built last year for the Shenzhen, Hong Kong Biennale 2020. Actually, it's a pop-up school. This structure doesn't require any condition for the foundation. It can be built in the factory and constructed within 5 days. So this actually gives us more possibility to deliver pop-up school. Particularly today, during the COVID time, this structure can give a more possibility for open door, open air learning space. And even though for this space, we conclude 6 features of that. Because for today, the modern school, it requires collaboration space, private learning space, and the very open to outside to provide the kids for connecting to the surrounding, and also very communicative within the structure. And the rich color and the material for children to experience. So this is still sitting on the site, since even though the panelli is over, actually the landlord decided to keep it for the, became pop-up learning center for their own company. I will go. So now you can see this is a gathering space and it's a sports space, all constructed within this 200 square meter. The limited square meter offers the maximum possibilities. Here you can see the yellow, the cross, which is the master plan for our buildings. And the last 2 pages, which I'm going to show, actually is 110,000 square meter school we are constructing right now in Hainan, which is in the tropical area of China. It's an island. Even though it's a massive construction, we still take consideration of the local tropical climate. Here in the central, as you can see, the half-done steel structure, which offers elevated building for the natural ventilation, to provide the energy saving consideration. Plus, in the contrast with the background of the high rise, we provided the extended horizontally, very extended school learning space. This is also kind of an answer to the local structure and the local culture. Okay, thank you for everyone. I hope the page reached the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Dong Hao. It did, and it was a fantastic presentation. And I really want to go to Hainan as well, the tropical. And it was dubbed as the Hawaii of China. Very much looking forward to go. Fantastic buildings, particularly the one in Shenzhen as well. We are now going to go back to slightly south to Malaysia and welcome Mustafa. Mustafa Kamal Zulkarnain is the principal at Architect Mustafa Kamal Malaysia. Mustafa is a fellow member of PAM, the Persatuan Architect Malaysia, and is currently a member of the Housing and Urban Wellbeing Committee. He's also heading the task force in PAM's strategic plan for 2030 architecture cities now and future. Mustafa, over to you.
Thank you very much, RIBA and Singapore Archifest. So for the heritage, as the housing and urban futurist as well as resilient city consultant, what we're trying to do here is trying to use back the kampong, where a lot of our settlement starts from there, where you have your houses, you have your schools, your shops, then you have your places of worship, and you have your natural livelihood, where it's the fishing village or even the paddy fields. So between that, interspersed are roads and also these informal gardens. So these informal gardens are the ones that is going to be the starting point where I'm going to rejuvenate and also celebrate in our modern demands of townships. So this is where the culture and of the kampongs is now being brought into the urban scene. And starting from the house with the lots by itself, so now it can be informal between clusters or where you can have a central open space. But here in this township in Klang Valley near KL, we try to actually house about 450 hectares And we use the kampong principle to actually create these buildings sprinkled onto the lawns and onto the landscape. So where you can see those greens are actually spaces in between, just like when you see in the heritage kampong, where you have the blue way and the green way, and you have the thoroughfares. And this creates the cross ventilation for the township. So this is what we are trying to enliven and also rejuvenate and also to celebrate. And from here, we have even the lakes to create the breeze and better usage for even the animals. Love it because there's a horse riding school next door. So the house come here to graze the lawn. So it is actually a circumnavigation of 5 kilometers of walking trails that creates this Denai. So this Denai Alam is actually an award-winning township that have about 40,000 people staying here. And they are of undulating terrain. So from that kampong principle, we try to have the best of kampong and put it into an urban context so that people can still feel the essence of kampong. You know, the trails there as part of the jogging track and where children can go to school, and also as a security feature where the housewives can see who walks along the streets and also who walks along the pathway. So you don't need to use the vehicle. So you can see where they're interconnected between the neighborhoods, the cluster of housing. You have neighborhood shops and you have green trails that goes along. You can have soccer field and a congregation of trees where you can do your, how shall I say, recreation. Because in tropics, you try to get away from the sun because you don't go up in the middle of the sun to actually basking, but you try to run away from the sun, but you still have got this breeze. So this is where the cross ventilation is very, very crucial. And this is one of the ways that we feel that, especially in the pandemics now, the kampong way, you can use this as the healing corridors. So this green, the very strong green and the blues, they create this cross ventilation around this 452 hectares so that people feel the breeze goes through, permeability of a township and permeability just like in kampong. So you have this beauty. And also the width of the open space have got this hierarchy, and people can enjoy the lakes and they can have a bigger parks in the central of the crossroads. So there you can have a soccer field. So you actually don't have to drive to the park. You can actually walk and start from your home. So anywhere is actually a park. So that's why we call it Denai, because Denai is a green walking trail. So you can have the soccer field, or you can have even a group courtyards for basketball or sepak takraw. So with new housing, the blocks we do are short blocks so that you can have better, how shall I say, cross ventilation between the units and clusters. And this will create this feeling of kampong breeze that comes through, and the houses are all different heights so that you can have this importance in the terrain. So these are, to look at kampong, the houses are never the same. So along the street, you see different houses in the same street. And if you look on the other side where the mirror image of it is not the same because it's different, but even though the lot size are the same. So this is where we try to use the uniqueness of kampong and the heritage where we once was the beginning of settlements to actually bring to the forefront of the future of townships or future of human living, and with better healing corridors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mustafa. It's really nice to see how kampong's now being brought back into the modern world. I partly grew up in Malaysia, and it's really fantastic to see that. And I totally agree with you. In the tropics, we get away from the sun by hiding under the tree. I remember that as I grew up. Fantastic, thank you. We're going to now move on to our penultimate speaker. We go back up north, well, north as in the world, global, to Colin Ward. Colin is a senior partner at Foster's and Partners in Hong Kong and has been responsible for many high-profile schemes, including the winning competition entries for the South Beach development in Singapore and the West Kowloon Cultural District. I'm pleased to hand over to Colin now.
Hi, Zena. Thank you very much. It's good to be here, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk in your Archifest. I'm going to talk about the Murray Building, which Jonathan mentioned earlier on. The Murray building, incredibly, when it was finished in 1970, was the tallest building in Hong Kong. You can see it here. It's that sort of tall white building on the right-hand side of the photograph. But by the time we came to look at it, and we were asked to look at changing it, this old government office building, into a hotel, it had been lost in a sea of crystalline buildings in the incredible urban centre that is central Hong Kong. And you couldn't really see it anymore. And actually, it's tucked away in the middle there, but I can't really point it out to you with my cursor at the moment in time. Sadly, it was lost to the crystalline skyline, but it wasn't just lost to the crystalline skyline, it was kind of lost to the city. The intervening years had seen it literally caged off from everyone, surrounded by a sea of concrete. Even the old and valuable tree was encased in a sea of concrete, removing the building from everyday use and providing, if you like, almost like an urban blind spot within the city that no one could use. So no longer a proud addition to the city, the Murray had become a pay-as-you-go car park. Cars are shoehorned into every corner, and a belt of sort of bush-hammered concrete, the final aggressive defensive gesture, sort of encircling the building, saying, please keep away. So our aim was therefore to sort of reconnect it with the city when we started. We want this building, to give this building back to everyone in Hong Kong, to relink the building and the surrounding spaces, to paths, to routes through the site, and also actually through the building itself. And in doing this, to transform what were the barren, unloved car park spaces into a series of open 24-hour-a-day, public, incredibly accessible terraces and green spaces for everyone, and also to unlock the tree and to give it maybe a chance to sort of breathe again. So we changed the east elevation of the building from looking like a car park like this into a new public space, a new landmark along a series of reconnected routes, a new building open to everyone 24 hours a day for everyone to enjoy. Removing the closed off offices and back of house spaces, the broom cupboards, the security rooms, the old office spaces at the ground level on the west, and turning into open, outward facing public spaces for everyone to enjoy 24/7. This approach ran vertically as well as horizontally. We tried to rework the MEP on the roof systems, and removing the AHUs, we tucked them away in one of the ground floor restaurant spaces. And by doing that, we also created another publicly accessible, available destination on the rooftop, an inside-outside bar with incredible views to central Hong Kong, to the harbour, and also up to the peak. The most striking element of the building are these incredibly clever recessed windows. We tried really hard and worked with the original architect, who's now retired in Dorset in the UK, to preserve the spirit of his original intention. The previous high windowsills were designed for an office building and hiding office desks and office files, but this was kind of inconsistent really with the more residential open feel we wanted for a hotel. So previously the windows were these old steel framed crystal windows that we all love, and the height of them was defined by standard issue government office desk, plus one A4 folder, plus 1 inch, according to Ron, the previous architect. So working with Ron, the original architect and a committed modernist, as he always kept telling us, form follows function was all he was interested in, and good on him for that. He agreed a hotel room demands a more gracious window, a more intimate relationship with the guests. We therefore changed the windows to create a series of frame views with a lower sill that enabled a number of different interactions with the outside world, from day beds in the hotel rooms, to views while you were bathing, to places where you could recline, to places where you could enjoy a view from your workouts, and finally also a place where you could enjoy a view from your sauna with one-way glass in the sauna, I might add. For us though, when we've been struck by the building, we were struck by how profoundly sustainable reusing the Murray has been. No more months of demolition, spending years in the ground, agonising over a new structure. The Murray gave us all of this from day one. So we felt it was reasonable to ask, oh, sorry, I lost this one. We felt it was then reasonable to ask, oh, sorry, I've lost my clicker here, sorry. Can I say next one, Stuart, if you wouldn't mind doing that? And we felt it reasonable to ask, how great a benefit is it to adaptively reuse an old building? Stuart, if you wouldn't mind doing the clicker. I seem to have lost mine suddenly. Stuart, then if you can hear me.
Colin, we'll sort your clicker. I did hear you. Stuart will move your presentation.
Okay, perfect. Great. So we can go to the next one. That would be great. Thank you. So how much does it benefit to adaptively reuse an old building? Next one. And when you don't have to build all of those blade walls, you don't have to build that incredibly large concrete core. Next one, Stuart, if you can. Great. So if you don't have to build all those blade walls, and you don't have to build that incredibly concrete core, how much of a benefit is that? Next one, please. And the answer is it's a big benefit. The equivalent of over 100,000 tons of carbon is what you can save. Next one, please. Which is the equivalent of planting 2.8 million seedlings and growing them for over 10 years. Next one. So that got us thinking. This is the view of Hong Kong that everyone recognizes, tall, totally glass buildings in a subtropical climate where the sun beats down on these buildings endlessly for months on end, greenhouses in the sky that we then have to artificially cool to make them habitable for people. It's complete insanity, really, but that's what we're doing all over CBDs all over the world. Next one, please. But the Murray, on the other hand, does none of this. The genius of the original design, which has nothing to do with us, it's Ron's genius, is that the blade walls protect the building from the sun, shielding all of the glass. As you can see on this slide, the east and west sun hits the concrete blade walls. Next one, please. So when the sun hits the building, it is blocked by concrete, but where the sun doesn't hit the elevation, you get abundant views, as you can see on the left-hand side of this slide here. Phillips designed this building 50 years ago, and we're still building greenhouse high-rise buildings in CBDs all over the planet. Ron showed us the correct way to build for an appropriate tropical architecture all those years ago, and we still don't seem to have learned the lesson very much. Next one, please. So compared to a typical Hong Kong high-rise building, how much better is the Murray than those glass buildings that we talked about earlier on? Next one, please. Well, the window-to-wall ratio on the Murray helps you an awful lot. It's 27% window-to-wall ratio, which is very, very little window, if you like. Next one, please. But the rooms still work incredibly well. You can see from the plan here that each room has a series of spaces created by those solar shading walls. So a space for study, a space for bathing, a space for leisure. Next one, please. And with only a 27% window-to-wall ratio, these spaces are still filled with natural light and give you fantastic views out across the city. Next one, please. But importantly, what this gives us is a 70% reduction in the total solar gains over a typical new build, one of those glass buildings that we mentioned earlier on. Next one, please. Which gives us saving of over 400 tons of carbon each and every year. Next one, please. The equivalent of planting 500,000 seedlings and growing them for over 10 years. Next one, please. The last one. So for us, I guess effectively the Murray's been so much more than simply working on a heritage structure for us as an office. It's been a complete revelation in a number of ways, an object lesson in stitching buildings into the whole historic urban fabric, the jigsaw of Hong Kong city centre, but also an exemplar of how to design in a climatically appropriate way for a subtropical climate in Hong Kong. And for that, we owe Ron, the original architect, an incredible debt of gratitude. We enjoyed working on the building with him. That's my last slide. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Colin. That's really fascinating to hear the workings of the Murray building. Really, really fascinating indeed. We are now going to move on to our final speaker, last but certainly not least, Annalie Riches, founding director of Michael Riches, based in London, and winner of the 2019 RIBA Sterling Prize for Architecture. Annalie contributes across all the scales of architectural practice. The projects include Velocity, the winning entry to the 2018 Infrastructure Commission competition, providing 200,000 new homes between Oxford and Cambridge. She's also leading on Park Hill Phase 2, which I believe is what she's going to be talking a bit about today. And over to you, Annalie.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I'm going to talk about a building that's incredibly important really to the heritage of Sheffield, and it's a building that tells lots of stories. Moving on. Oh no, it's not working. Oh yes, okay. So Park Hill was completed in 1961. It's 1,000 flats, and we're working on phase 2, which is 200 flats and 6,000 square meters of commercial space. And it was one of a series of social housing blocks that was built by Sheffield City Council. Quite a phenomenal achievement. They completed 4 schemes within 7 years of each other, over 3,000 flats in total. Most have been demolished. This is Hyde Park, that's gone, and Kelvin, but Park Hill was saved by listing it. It's streets in the sky proposal, which means that the streets are lifted up. There's a street every 3rd floor, and you either go into your flat and up or down into your flat. Ooh. And it was a kind of citadel, really. It had everything there in its beginning. It had schools, shops, and it was incredibly successful. So much so that it was copied not only across Sheffield, but in Manchester and in London. 10 years later, the Trellick Tower was built. So it started its decline really with the loss of jobs and mass unemployment in Sheffield, and it became a notorious sink estate and had, it's a building that still is either loved or loathed. And because it was listed, so it was probably going to sit there and do nothing because it's such a phenomenal job to kind of restore a building like this. But Urban Splash stepped in and they did phase one by Hawkins Brown and Studio Egway West, which completely reinvented it. And it was an incredibly successful project. And for phase two, we were given so phase two adjoins phase one with those bridges, and that Urban Splash decided to run a design competition, and we were selected on the shortlist, and they did an unusual thing of giving a flat to each of the contestants. And we noticed, because we had studied the building, we noticed all these traces of things that people had done to try and make it into their home. There were lots of coloured balconies, balcony reveals, and so we took this and decided to put coloured insulated panels on the reveals as people had done themselves, so they could recognise their own flat. And true to the tradition of so the view, those are the views across Sheffield. It's got phenomenal views. So true to the tradition of going to graffiti at Bot Hill, we decided to do a presentation where we just drew our designs on the walls. We managed to rehouse Pooh and Piglet in one of the spaces we were going to make, which I think might have won us the competition. And it's one of the things it's famous for is the fact that the streets were designed for a milk float. That was what was considered the most important thing in street design. So and when you look at the old photos, you can see again people have personalised their front doorsteps, concrete front doorsteps, and they covered them with linoleum. And when we were on site, we found the traces of a lot of these linoleum patterns still there, which we've kind of reappropriated, traced over and reappropriated, so that everyone has their own. Went back. Everyone has their own extended front door mat to try and give more defensible space. And we've also introduced glazing, so there's more overlooking onto the street, because that was incredibly problematic. And what's great about having an existing building to work with is you can actually do mock-ups really easily on site. So we've been using it, we've been painting the reveals and trying out different colours as we go along. And so, you know, really our idea is kind of different to phase one. We're saying that from the front, Park Hill looks like Park Hill. We're keeping the bricks. They're in good condition and we're insulating behind them. But as it turns the corner, that's where the colour is introduced. And the colour's been a big debate. I think we're finally there with it. And that's it as it. Oh gosh, now I've gone on to, right. Can I go back? So that was it about 6 months ago. And now the windows are going in and we're about to start applying colour to it. What's incredibly exciting is they've also completed phase 3, which is going to be student housing. And they're about to start on phase 4, which is going to be a new art gallery and artist studios and more housing. So this place has been reinvented and it's a massive success story. I was a student in Sheffield and this building was then declining already and had become kind of synonymous with the failures of modernism to solve the housing crisis and produce housing. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be part of its rebirth. Thank you.
Thank you, Annalie. I live in Yorkshire and I go to Sheffield quite a bit, so I see the building very well indeed. And it's as you say, it's a Marmite, but I think it's being loved much more by the community. It's one of those things that the first thing you see as you come up from Sheffield, and it's fantastic. Thank you for that. Now, we're going to try to go back to G for our third attempt. Third time lucky, they say. G, you're there. Fantastic. What we are going to do is G's not going to turn on his video to try and enable us to connect with him. So G, over to you.
Okay. I think I will give the control to you and to go to the page 10.
Yeah. Hi G, Stu here. I'm standing by. Just say next and I will change it.
Okay, yeah. I still see my name page now. Just hold on a second. Can you hear me clearly? Apologize about the connection issues.
Yes. Yes, we can hear you clearly. I think, again, I think it's just taking a few seconds to update your end.
Yeah, this is a... Okay, this the first page is super slow for my end. It's a little bit weird.
So we're all seeing a slide with a moving car.
The moving car. Okay, yeah. I think I...
Yeah, like
you're on the first one, G. Do you want us to move?
Slide 1.
Yeah, I think let's move down to the page 9. I can't say the page.
Sorry. We build as new. Respect for the original function.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. The you can see the building on the original photo. This building 100 years ago is actually a quite modern language buildings in 100 years ago. But unfortunately, in 1990s, the building facade are demolished, and you can see from the picture from the right side, it's becoming a quite awkward, the fake European style, and also the function is changed. Originally, it's a very important theater in China, in Shanghai. And nowadays it's a hardware market inside, and the government tried to restore the function back into this building. So what we did is we can see the whole building already lost the original design and the aesthetic, and also they added one more floor on the top. So we used the modern language, the modern design to combine with the functions, create totally new buildings, the new facade, but also based on the original facade geometry and the expression. What we call it is respect the original functions. So next page, thanks. So talking about build as new, also on the west end of this street, there is a building, corner buildings are very important. That's the largest pharmacy in early 19th centuries. So, but you can see the same story in 1980s. This building demolished and changed to some weird green color glass. And
I believe we've lost you again.
I think we have. Apologies. I think we're going to have to move on now because I know, G, if you can hear us, I'm very sorry we've lost you again. We will certainly come back to you and share your presentation with the audience. Audience, everyone, I apologize for the various challenges we've had with the IT. But I'm sure you understand how is one of the challenges, isn't it? We're connecting virtually, but we've had some fantastic presentation and it has been an absolute privilege. I don't want to leave without us asking at least 2 questions. And I'm going to start with the first question from the audience today. And I'm going to direct this question because I don't think it's relevant to everyone. The question from one of our audience is, should architects consider the post-colonial status in the restoration of heritage buildings that come from a country's colonial history? By restoring colonial architecture, are we at risk of celebrating the heritage of colonialism instead of the heritage of the people that were colonized? In what way do you as architects feel that we can mitigate this? Now, I'm going to go to colleagues in Singapore. Peng Beng, maybe is that, are you comfortable to answer that?
Yeah, I think the way we see this was that to look at the connection to our past by trying to understand a larger pattern of movement. So rather than seeing culture as a static moment in time, but we try to see culture and history as a flow that is unfolding and alive. So the Architecture Act for the present is charged with new possibilities. So rather than seeing the separation between like colonialist and the colonized, we rather choose to see it as an integral development over time and across time, so that what was once perhaps a military place could now become a place of hospitality. And that's only possible because of certain interventions that were started 100 years ago, and whether it was right or it was wrong, or it was good or it was bad, it's something that we could respond to through our project without judgment onto that moment in time. So I think whether we choose whether we call it colonial architecture or whether we call it local architecture, I think it is always a response to that moment that was in development. So if you're looking at a teenager, you wouldn't expect the teenager, you would like see a possibility of a wise old person as well in the teenager. I don't know whether that makes sense.
No, it does. It totally does. It does. I know exactly what you mean. I wonder whether Mustafa from Malaysia, what are your views on this? Because there's a lot of similarities, obviously, with Singapore and Malaysia and the colonial buildings. What's your view on that from slightly further north?
Okay. Remember that when we restore a colonial building to its original glory or to its original thing, we are not trying to make it a statement that they are great or what, but we are trying to answer to the nation's history that we were once there. It's a passage of time, and we need to understand that we didn't come here from nothing. There is actually a flow. There is actually a pathway. There's actually, how should I say, a storyline. There is actually the start, the beginning, what we call an incident. So it has to be part of the nation building, because if you say that it's actually glorifying something, no, it's actually glorifying the way that we are now, that we were once then. So that's the reason why I think preserving heritage is also important, so that people understand that where they are now is where they were once there, as a society, as a country, or even as a city.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good point. And I'm going to bring, I think I'm going to bring Jeff into this, if you can hear me, Jeff, because obviously you've restored Yangon, which is very much for the people of Yangon. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I think, rather as Mustafa says, I think the most important thing in historic buildings projects is to preserve authenticity, and therefore you have a record to learn from in future, which is full and complete. And I think that means we need to take care in their interpretation, how we tell the story and how we make a building relevant to today and to the future. But I think the key thing is that in reusing and regenerating buildings, we create opportunities for people to learn and to engage and to understand, and hopefully to improve their own livelihoods and their own home cities and places. So I think preservation is an important part in authenticity, but the meaning of buildings can change. And I think it's important that we trust that authenticity, but also use the regeneration opportunity.
Thank you, Jeff. And the final on this topic, Mark, preservation is the word Jeff used, and also moving on. What are your thinking on this? Because you've done some obviously significant work in UAE.
I think to the same point as Jeff really is that giving a building an enduring new use and allowing the building to transmit its identity and the heritage of a place is something that's absolutely key. We learn from the past, and we're able to transmit those ideas into future architectures. So for me, it's very key. And as Jeff said as well, the authenticity of a building, all the various different eras of construction, tells us of a time and a place, an economy, a political standpoint, etc. And what happens in the future, we can always reflect on those moments. So I think it's important to keep.
I think we've lost Mark as well.
Have you?
Yeah, just a little bit. It's all right. You're
Okay,
nearly there.
It's because I've turned my camera on again. That's why.
No, thank you. We did get the gist of that. So thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
I think it's, it's fascinating to see that we all have similar thinking about buildings. But I think heritage is also an interesting element in some parts of the world, where Annalie, you spoke about Park Hill, and that's very much part of our heritage in the United Kingdom. So it's not just about buildings that were built 150 years ago. So Annalie, I think this is one for you. It says, and also a couple of you, I'm going to pick on you, I'm afraid. Would you like to share one of your favorite example of the kind of project from the mid-20th century that possess high urban architectural content and our social and economic significance as a product of their time? I don't know whether we've got Annalie here. I think we've lost Annalie as well, haven't we? Colin, are you with us?
Hi, I am. Yeah, hi, I am. Yes, hi.
I don't know whether you are. Yeah, you heard the question, but one of the question is: so, would you like to share one of your favorite examples of a kind of a mid-20th century project that possess high urban architectural content and of our social and economic significance?
A mid-20th century building that demonstrates what, sorry?
That possess high urban architectural content and our social and economic significance.
Oh, okay,
that's a question and a half, isn't it?
It's a slightly broad, which is a great question. It's a slightly broad question, though.
Yeah.
I think probably every city in the world could probably, every architect on this panel and every architect listening, I'm sure, would have completely different views on this. Every city in the world has buildings that I think could also sort of answer that question. I guess maybe then I could try to make it slightly more local. Maybe then I'll try and give a Hong Kong answer to that. I would then think actually then probably of well, it's the Murray Building actually. Ron Phillips, who is the architect on the Murray Building. Somebody's asked the question. I think he was the original architect on the Murray, and he's a fabulous gentleman called Ron Phillips, who now lives in. He's retired, lives in Dorset in the UK on the south coast. He's a lovely, lovely guy, and he was in Hong Kong for about 15 years or so, working with the local government, and he built the Murray Building. But he also built a building called City Hall, which is another fantastically modernist building right in the heart of Hong Kong. Again, it's now lost in the sort of the stalagmite architecture of Hong Kong. But anybody who is in Hong Kong for any length of time, any architect in Hong Kong, loves City Hall, and it was the old, if you like, I suppose, kind of cultural complex for the city. It's got a number of amphitheatres in there. It's got some public gardens. It used to front up onto the harbour. It's now slightly set back a little bit due to reclamation, but it still has kind of like an incredibly significant impact on people's lives. And I think people kind of consider it one of the sort of the touchstones of sort of the mid-20th century architecture for Hong Kong. And it still has an incredibly valid and lively impact on people's lives. You can still go to concerts there, you can still go to shows there, there are still exhibitions on in this place. And it's still incredibly valid now as it was when it was built 50 odd or more years ago. And so I suppose to give you a very local example, here in Hong Kong, I think City Hall, which is by the same architect, Ron, who would be an example, I think, it combines all the things that people want in architecture. So incredibly clever urban approach and incredibly beautiful, very simple, elegant architecture.
Thank you, Colin. I know exactly the building you mean. So yeah, great building. Yeah, fantastic. Jonathan and YK, I wonder whether you're with us. I've got one last question and then we're going to wrap up. The question here, and I think you could give the contrast here. How should architects preserve the intangible part of the built heritage the facades are conserved, but how about the functions of the building? Like, both very different to some of the examples you've given us. Shall we go to YK, please?
Well, for the example of Capitol, although the building is being conserved and new users have to be actually introduced, and the good thing about this site, the context, is actually there is a mixed use development. So there is some retail and residential that is actually in the development, and this gives the possibility of having a lot of pedestrian and activities, actually in the middle of the center plaza. In the evenings, the activities like, the people do Zumba dancing, and it gives a lot of life and in the context of the heritage buildings. And I think that kind of research and innovation and architecture and engineering and programming all comes together, so that the building, in the heritage building, the function, actually there is a refresh use, so that the heritage is preserved and tangible, and also the intangible can be brought to the present, and also hopefully to the future generations.
Thank you for that, YK. And Jonathan, I think over to you.
I think in the context of Pearl Bank, the units in Pearl Bank are really huge, and I think to preserve that original size of the apartments itself is almost impossible, because it will never what every developer says that it will never sell. So what we had to sort of promote to them is that you have to adaptively reuse it, and we are not. We're not. We're not against tearing down parts of the building and refurbishing it for newer use. I think for modern buildings, I think that's still possible, because there's some ways to still integrate the new into the old in a very sensitive manner. So I think we can actually preserve the intangibles, but it still has to be tweaked in some way to be relevant in today's context. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. And we've reached to the end of today's session. We're slightly running late. There are a couple of questions from our audience. I'm sorry we can't answer everything, but I will direct it to the relevant speakers and come back to you all individually by email, if that's okay. Again, apologies for some of the technology challenges. It happens, it's virtual, it's the world we're living in today. But I'm sure you've enjoyed today's event as much as I have. It's been a true pleasure to be chairing today's inspiring session. Fantastic to see all those examples. I have learned a lot, and I'm not an architect at all. But there's so many examples of powerful transformative results from good architecture that really have improved people's lives, our cities, and benefits the environment, which is the key element of good design and design excellence, which is where we started the journey from today. Thank you again to all our speakers for today's event: Jonathan, Jeff, YK, Ganji, I hope you can still hear me, Peng Bang, Mark, Donghao, Mustafa, Colin, and Annalie. I also would like to thank the High Commissioner for her welcome words, and many thanks to UKDIT in Singapore and our friends from Singapore Chapter, who has really supported the RIBA and their contribution for the work that we do in Singapore and elsewhere. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining and contributing with such interesting
thank you.
events.
Thank you, RIBA.
Take care and stay safe. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.